Tell me about El Mencho, and also where do they get these names? El Chapo, El Mencho. I mean, I'm not the best at naming conventions. Creativity, I struggle with sometimes, but they seem oddly similar. I'm waiting for something a little bit more off the beaten path.
Of course. There are fairly interesting and fairly original names, but it's true. El Chapo and El Mencho. El Chapo is because he's short. Chapo means shorty in Mexican slang, and El Mencho means someone of bad taste, essentially a country bumpkin.
Oh, like a
Um,
redneck.
yeah, completely. It's a redneck, and he completely lives that reputation. El Mencho comes up. Remember, I mentioned that the Valencias were wealthy avocado farmers.
Yes.
He's born in a small village in the mountains of Michoacan, near the town of Aguililla. And at the age of 11, he drops out of school to go work on an avocado farm for the Valencias because his family's poor. He's got six brothers and sisters, and he needs to bring money home. From there, the story gets a little bit apocryphal because he's so legendary. There's rumors that within a year he was running a marijuana plantation at the age of 12, or that he was moving drugs at the age of 14. It's very difficult to actually put any fact checking into those stories. They're possible. Certainly, he allies himself with the Valencias very quickly. He becomes very good friends with Abigail Valencia, who will become his second hand man, his right hand man as he grows older. He marries into the Valencias fairly early as a young man. He goes to California in the 80s with his wife, who's a Valencia. They have two children there. He's there peddling their marijuana, peddling their heroin, learning how to make meth. So he's part of the inner workings of the Valencia clan at a very early age. So he's bathed in the drug trade. He remains a middle operative until that exile I talked about with the Sinaloa cartel. When he goes to the Sinaloa cartel, he becomes a mentee for Ignacio Coronel. Ignacio Coronel was the head in Guadalajara for the Sinaloa cartel, and he was the uncle of El Chapo's wife, so a very high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel. El Mencho works as a bodyguard, as a hitman for him. We believe El Mencho was involved in the Matazetas, which were this hit squad that were online, these masked Avengers that were killing, 30, 40 people at a time connected to the Zetas in eastern Mexico. We believe that he was part of that, although that's never been actually confirmed. What is clear is that his power was growing, and in 2010, Ignacio Coronel is killed. The control of the Sinaloa cartel over the Valencias is broken, and he breaks off and forms the CJNG. Very quickly, it's evident that he is bloodthirsty, even at a level that for Mexican cartels is quite rare. Several people who were arrested at the time give interviews saying El Mencho is a different kind of man. El Mencho is going to bring war in a way that we haven't really seen, especially against Sinaloa. He doesn't begin by consolidating an area. He begins by aggressively going coast to coast. He understands he needs a presence on the Pacific and a presence on the Atlantic as fast as possible. The presence on the Pacific, they have it in Jalisco, Colima, and northern Michoacan. He goes into Guanajuato, takes over a lot of the oil industry there. A lot of oil pipelines are tapped up, and it's a very lucrative way for the cartel to make money. And then as quickly as he can, he moves into Veracruz, which is a big state on the east of Mexico, on the Atlantic seaboard. So within a couple of years, he's got an empire that stretches from coast to coast. Meanwhile, El Mencho concentrates on the criminal side. He doesn't concentrate on the money. For the money, he has his right-hand man, Abigail Guzman, Valencia, and his brothers, who form a clan called the Queenies. The Queenies are money laundering experts, and they take the billions in cash that El Mencho and his side have provided, and they launder it all around the world. We have rumors of the Queenies buying luxury real estate in Barcelona, buying hotels and restaurants in Mexico, investing in property in Bolivia, in Brazil, in Uruguay. So very quickly, even allegations that they had properties in Hong Kong, although that is an area that I was never able to fully crack. But so very quickly, all around the world, they're setting up these deals. So these are very ambitious young narcos, right? They're not content on doing things the old way. They want to make as much money as possible in as many ways as possible, as quickly as possible, and they'll kill anyone who gets in their way.
How old is El Mencho now?
El Mencho now is 58, 59.
Okay.
The thing is, he hasn't been seen in public since 2016.
Really?
His voice has been heard on a phone call. the cult of personality around him survives because in every banner that the CJNG puts up, in every video that they put out on social media, his face or his name will be on the banner, or the troops will swear loyalty to him very publicly in almost a cultish kind of way. That's remarkable for someone who many believe him to be dead. There are narco corridos saying that he's dead. There are members of the CJNG who've turned on the group saying that he's died and they no longer have loyalty to them. I believe him to be alive for a couple of reasons. One, his death would be one of the most significant criminal changes in Mexico in a decade, and it would be almost impossible to keep that quiet. Secondly, in a few videos, there's a voice that you can hear off camera of a man who would be in his late 50s, 60s, and it's consistent. I believe that to be him. And third, the loyalty of his troops, even with this watering down of the Mexican element, even with this foreign influx who would have no way of checking whether Mencho is alive, there are a lot of powerful lieutenants who would be all too happy to move up. So I do believe that he's in southern Jalisco, northern Colima, hiding or staying out of the limelight because he knows that getting him would be a priority for the Mexican government and the US government. He's also known to have severe kidney disease. So that also may be crippling him at the moment.
Somebody at his level, does he have to stay in Mexico? You were talking about money laundering and the tentacles that spread globally, real estate. If he were to leave Mexico and, say, go to live his twilight years, or however you would want to describe it, in one of these places where he's laundered money, he's got a foundation, it's established, he has a palatial house that he could look out over the sea and watch the sunset. By him leaving that country, would that initiate somebody else rising up to take his position? Does he physically have to be there to have this hold?
I think so. I think we also need to consider who he is as a man. His nickname is El Mencho, right? He's a country bumpkin. He's taken that on board as his identity. He did live sometime in California. He was in prison in the US for a couple of years. Apart from that, we don't know him to have traveled. There are plenty of rumors out there that he fled to Australia at one point. Australian police, I believe, investigated that and said they couldn't find any semblance of that. I believe Mencho is sick. He's an aging guy. I don't believe, speaks much English. And yes, there's not much history of Mexican narcos keeping their power outside the country. In fact, almost none. They are it's not the Colombians who you saw after Escobar leave the country and start these drug trafficking empires while they were living abroad. Mexicans are much more tied to their land. Even in the case of Mencho and the lack of a power base that I mentioned, I think he's quite comfortable living in areas where he knows he's safe.